Yesterday afternoon I heard the knock before I saw him. 3 short taps, polite but unsure, like he was asking permission from the wind. I opened the door, and there he was, that neighbor kid from 2 houses down. I'd seen him mowing lawns last summer, earbuds and baseball cap low. He couldn't be more than 16. He pointed toward my driveway where my old Chevy sat like a rusted tombstone. "Sir," he said, voice steady but soft, "I could help you fix it. If you want." I just stared at him. For months I hadn't touched that truck. It had been sitting there since the morning I drove home from the hospital without Mary. I'd told myself I'd start it one day, but I never did. The battery was probably dead. I sure felt like it was. I cleared my throat. "You good with engines?" He smiled, a small, crooked thing. "My dad taught me before he left." There was a tiny pause after left, like he wasn't sure if he should have said it. Something in that word. It caught in my chest. I nodded toward the truck. "Go ahead." She's been quiet a long time. He walked over, moving careful, respectful, like the truck was some sleeping animal he didn't want to wake too soon. The sunlight hit his hair, that late October gold, and for a second I saw my boy Danny standing there. Same age, same easy confidence he used to fake when he didn't want me to see he was scared. I leaned against the porch post, hands in my pockets. The kid popped the hood, and the hinges groaned like they were remembering. Dust rose up in the air, smelled like old oil and time. He wiped his hands on a rag he'd brought, whistling under his breath. "You kept her in good shape," he said. "Just needs a little patience." "Yeah," I muttered. "That's been in short supply around here." He didn't laugh. Just looked up and met my eyes, calm, clear, steady. That kind of look you don't expect from a teenager. Then he turned back to the engine. I could hear his tools clicking, the rhythm of metal and motion. It mixed with the ticking of my wristwatch, the same one Mary gave me for our 10th anniversary. I hadn't wound it in weeks, but somehow it still ticked, stubborn as ever. The air smelled faintly like rain, though the sky was only gray. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, then silence again. That kind of small-town stillness that makes every sound feel heavier. After a while, the boy said, "You really loved her, huh?" He didn't look up. Just said it like he was reading it off the metal. He swallowed hard. "Yeah. Guess I still do." He nodded once. "My mom says love doesn't stop. It just waits." I didn't know what to say to that. So I didn't. I just watched him, hands steady, eyes focused, breathing slow. It had been years since someone touched that truck like it mattered. The rain finally started, soft, like the sky was whispering something we weren't ready to hear. I felt the first drop hit my hand, cold against my skin. I didn't move. Something about the moment told me maybe it was time. Maybe both of us were fixing something more than just an engine. The rain picked up, steady and quiet, like someone drumming fingertips on the roof of the world. The boy didn't flinch. He just kept working, sleeves, rolled up hair, damp eyes focused on the task. There was a calm to him I hadn't seen in a long time, not in kids, not in anyone really. "Got a name?" I finally asked. "Evan," he said, tightening a bolt. "Evan Brooks." "Bob Walker," I said, though he probably already knew. Everyone around here did. When you live in the same house for 40 years, folks stop using your last name. You just become the old man on Cedar Street. He grinned. "I know. My mom says you used to fix everyone's cars around here." I gave a small chuckle. "Yeah, that was a while ago. Guess time traded my wrench for a coffee cup." He looked up. "You still got the tools?" "In the garage," I said, nodding toward it. "Haven't touched 'em in years." Evan wiped his hands and stood. "Mind if I take a look?" Sometimes the right tools make things easier. I hesitated. That garage was like a museum of everything I'd been avoiding. Old oil stains, broken parts, and memories I didn't want to turn over. But the way he asked, polite patient, I just couldn't say no. Sure, I said. Watch your step. Floor's not level anymore. We pushed the side door open, and the smell hit me, that mix of dust, iron, and rain-soaked concrete. The single bulb flickered to life. When I pulled the chain, shadows danced across the walls over the pegboard, still holding the same wrenches I'd hung decades ago. Mary's handwriting was on a label taped to one of the drawer's wash rags. Clean ones. The tape had yellowed, but the words still held. Evan whistled low. Man, you got everything in here. Yeah, I murmured, except the will to use it. He didn't laugh, just picked up a socket wrench, weighed it in his palm like it was something sacred. My dad would have loved this place, he said softly. He always said, a garage tells the truth about a man. That made me pause. I looked around at the shelves, the grease, the half-finished workbench Mary used to scold me about. Then I guess mine says, I quit halfway through. Evan didn't argue. He just nodded, respectful, like he understood more than he should at his age. He found the tool he needed and headed back toward the truck. I stayed behind a second longer, staring at that little drawer with her handwriting. My fingers brushed the label, and for a heartbeat I could almost hear her voice, soft, teasing, warm. Don't wipe your hands on your jeans, Bob Walker, she used to say. That's what rags are for. My throat tightened. I pulled one out of the drawer anyway, the cleanest I could find, and followed Evan back out. The rain had eased to a mist, painting the driveway in silver. Evan was crouched again, hands deep in the engine, humming low under his breath. You sing, I asked. He shook his head. Nah, just helps me think. Mom says I got that from Dad. Where's he now? Evan hesitated just a second, too long. Not sure. Last we heard, he was in Texas. That was 2 years ago. I nodded, the ache in his voice feeling too familiar. Sometimes people leave before they realize what they're leaving behind. He gave a small, knowing smile. Yeah. Guess so. The radio inside my kitchen clicked on by itself, static, faint music drifting through the open window. The same old station I used to listen to while working in the shop. I hadn't touched it in months. Evan glanced toward it, then at me. Guess she misses being turned on too. I smiled despite myself. Guess we both do. The sound of rain, the hum of the radio, the soft ticking of my watch, all of it blended into something that almost felt like peace. By the time the sky turned, the color of old pewter, Evan had most of the truck apart and half of it back together again. He worked steady, slow, like he was fixing a heartbeat, not an engine. I stood nearby, coffee cup in hand, steam curling in the cool air. You sure you don't need a flashlight? I asked. He shook his head, eyes narrowed in concentration. Nah, the clouds are bright enough. Plus, I kinda like working in the gray. That made me grin. You and me both. A few drops hit my cup, the rain starting again, softer, this time polite. The kind that doesn't interrupt, just listens. Evan leaned back on his heels. You ever fix something that wasn't yours? The question caught me off guard. Sure. Half this town once upon a time. He looked up at me. I mean something that didn't belong to you, but needed fixing anyway. I took a slow sip before answering. Yeah, I did once. Didn't go too well. He didn't ask for more, but his silence did. It was my son, I said finally. Danny. He and we didn't end things right. Last I heard he was out west. California, maybe. Evan nodded, not prying. Just listening. He was about your age when we started butting heads, I said. Smart kid, but wild. Wanted to leave Ohio, chase something bigger. I told him the world didn't owe him a damn thing. He told me I didn't know the world. The boy stayed quiet, watching the rain slide down the windshield. I guess I thought being tough would make him strong, I went on. Turns out it just made us strangers. The sound of the rain filled the space between words. It had a rhythm, like a slow song we both already knew. Evan wiped his hands, his face soft with thought. You ever think of calling him? Every day, I said. Then I remember how I left things. Hard to fix something when you're the one who broke it. He glanced at the truck. Engines break for all kinds of reasons. Doesn't mean you stop trying. That hit harder than he knew. I just nodded, eyes fixed on the wet ground. He smiled, then a little sideways grin that reminded me of Danny again. You know, my dad used to say people and engines aren't that different. Both just need patience, and sometimes the right touch. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Your dad sounds like he knew a thing or two. Yeah, Evan said quietly, before he forgot how to stay. He said it like it was nothing, but I could hear the crack in it, small, hidden, but there. The radio drifted into an old country song, something about coming home after too long on the road. The melody slipped through the rain like a ghost. Mary used to hum this, I said, mostly to myself. Evan tilted his head. Your wife? Yeah, I said softly. She always said the road only matters if you know where you're driving back to. He smiled faintly. Guess she was right. Yeah, I said. Guess she was. The truck gave a small click when he twisted the key just enough to make both of us freeze. Then nothing. Evan sighed. Not yet. But she's close. I nodded. Ain't the first time a stubborn heart's taken more than one try. He grinned. Then we'll give her another. As the rain thickened, I caught my reflection in the window, tired eyes. Unshaven face, but softer somehow. Like maybe the weight I'd been carrying had started to shift. Just a little. Evan looked up at me, rain dripping from his cap. You ever think about what it'd sound like when she starts again? I smiled. Yeah. I think I'd remember how to breathe. And for the first time in months, that felt possible. Morning came slow, like the light was tired too. The rain had stopped sometime in the night, but the world still smelled like it. Wet earth, cold steel, and a hint of oil, the kind of smell that takes you back whether you want it to or not. Evan showed up early, just after 7, wearing the same faded hoodie from yesterday. He gave me a small wave through the window before I even had a chance to pour my coffee. Morning, Mr. Walker, he said. Mind if I keep at it? Not at all, I said, opening the door wide. Coffee's hot if you want some. He grinned. Mom says I'm too young for coffee. Tell her I said you're old enough for engine grease, you're old enough for caffeine. That made him laugh, a quick, bright sound that felt strange in my quiet house. I poured him half a cup anyway, and he took it like a peace offering. The sun peeked out from behind the clouds, laying a golden streak across the truck's hood. For a second, it looked almost new again. Evan noticed too. Looks better in the light. Most things do, I said. He nodded, sipping his coffee. My mom says that about people. Smart woman, I said. He smiled. She tries. We worked side by side for a while. While he worked, I mostly handed him tools and pretended to know what I was doing. But truth is, I liked the rhythm of it. The clank of wrenches, the low hum of effort, the occasional curse when something didn't fit. It was the music of the life I used to live. Between turns of the socket, Evan talked a little about school, how he didn't fit in much. How most of his friends didn't understand why he liked fixing things that couldn't talk back. People think it's boring, he said, but I like knowing when something works, it's because I cared enough to make it right. I looked at him then at the truck and couldn't help but smile. You keep thinking like that, you'll end up doing all right in this world. He shrugged, wiping sweat from his brow. That's the plan, I guess. Just want to do something that means something, you know. I did know. More than he could understand yet. The radio inside clicked on again, same static hum, then an old DJ's voice. Coming up next, a little tune for all you folks trying to start again. Evan chuckled. Guess your radio knows the theme. Yeah, I said, glancing toward the window. Seems she's got a sense of humor. He tightened the last bolt and leaned back. All right, Moment of truth. I stepped closer, hands suddenly unsteady. The way he said it, it felt like more than an engine test. He turned the key. The starter coughed once, twice, then fell silent. A pause. Then, with a sound like the world taking a breath, the truck roared to life. The rumble filled the driveway, the air, my chest. It was rough, uneven, but alive. Evan whooped, pumping his fist in the air. Told you she'd wake up. I just stood there. The vibration running through my feet, my bones. My throat burned with something that wasn't coffee. I started but couldn't finish. Evan grinned wide. You okay, Mr. Walker? I nodded slowly. Yeah, kid. I think I am. He shut off the engine, and the silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It was full of sound memory and something like forgiveness. Evan looked proud but humble. Guess all she needed was a little attention. I looked at him, voice quiet. Yeah. Most things do. The watch on my wrist ticked a little louder just then, steady, alive, right on time. And in that soft morning light, I realized maybe I wasn't broken beyond repair. Evan stayed for breakfast. I didn't plan it that way, it just sort of happened. I was standing there with 2 mugs of coffee and a pan of scrambled eggs when he said, "Smells good," and I couldn't bring myself to eat alone again. "Grab a plate," I told him. He hesitated, polite as ever. "You sure?" "Son," I said, "I haven't cooked for 2 in a long time. Don't ruin my streak." He smiled, that small, honest kind of smile that kids forget to fake. We sat at the kitchen table, the one with the nick still on the edge from when Danny dropped his model airplane there years ago. The rain clouds had passed, leaving the world washed clean, brighter somehow. Evan shoveled in a forkful, nodded approvingly. "Better than the school cafeteria." "Not exactly a high bar," I said. He laughed. "Still counts." We ate mostly in quiet, but it wasn't the heavy kind. It was the kind where words weren't needed. The radio hummed low in the background, some old tune with steel guitar and soft harmony. Mary used to hum along to that kind of music while she cooked. I caught myself tapping my thumb against the table, right in rhythm. After a while, Evan set his fork down. "You ever gonna drive her again?" I looked toward the driveway where the truck sat, sunlight catching the chrome. "I don't know. Been thinking about it." "You should," he said. "Engines like that, they don't wake up for nothing." I smirked. "You sound like you believe in ghosts." He grinned. "Maybe I do." We both chuckled, but the air shifted just a bit. Softer, more real. "My mom says fixing things is her way of praying," he said. "She sews stuff mostly. Patches up old clothes and gives them to people who need them. Says if you bring something broken back to life, you're talking to God in a language he understands." I stared at him for a long second. "Your mom sounds like Mary." He tilted his head. "Your wife." "Yeah," I said quietly. "She used to say something real close to that." The boy smiled, like he understood even if he couldn't. I leaned back, letting the light pour in through the window. The dust in the air looked like gold flakes dancing on the breath of morning. I hadn't noticed how beautiful that could be in a long time. Evan finished his coffee and stood. "I should head back. Mom'll worry if I'm late." "Sure," I said. "You did good work out there." He shrugged. "It was nothing." "No," I said firmly, "it wasn't." He looked down, shy again. "I'll stop by later, check the idle after it cools." "Doors open," I said. "Always." He started toward the street, then turned back. "Mr. Walker, when she started the truck, you looked like you were hearing something." I smiled faintly. "Yeah, maybe I was." He nodded, satisfied with that answer, and walked off down the wet sidewalk, boots splashing through the puddles like he didn't mind getting dirty. When he disappeared around the corner, I looked at the truck again. Her reflection shimmered in the water, pooled on the driveway like she was waiting. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keys. They still had the faded tag Mary wrote years ago, Chevy. Love you, drive safe. I traced the words with my thumb. My hands shook. The engine had come back to life. Maybe it was time I did too. I sat there a while longer listening to the faint ticking of the watch, the sigh of the cooling metal, the silence between it all. For the first time in years, the silence didn't scare me. It felt like an open road. That afternoon, the wind changed the kind of shift you can smell before you feel it. I was sitting on the porch with a mug of coffee gone cold, staring at that truck like it might blink. Every few minutes, I'd hear the ticking of the engine, cooling like a heartbeat settling after a long run. Then from down the street came the sound of a bicycle chain clicking steady, growing closer. Evan rolled up with a wrench tucked in his back pocket and a smile that said he'd been waiting all morning for an excuse to come back. "Afternoon, Mr. Walker," he called. "Mind if I take her for a sound check?" I chuckled. "Long as she doesn't outrun you." He leaned his bike against the mailbox and jogged up the drive. "She's too loyal for that." I like that. Loyal. A word you don't hear much anymore. He popped the hood, checking fluid levels. Lines the sort of things I used to do without thinking. Watching him, I saw flashes of myself at his age, the way I'd stay up late in the shop, hands black, with grease radio low. Mary bringing me coffee in her flannel robe. "You got good instincts, kid," I said. "You ever think about doing this for a living?" Evan shrugged. "Sometimes. Mom says it's honest work. But teachers keep telling me I should pick something bigger." "Bigger than honest?" I asked, half smiling. He laughed. "Guess that's what I said." I handed him a rag, one of the ones Mary had labeled years ago. He took it, turning it over, like it meant something. "You know, I said the world's full of people chasing big things. But sometimes the small ones hold better." He looked at me curiously. "Like what?" I gestured toward the truck. "Like this. Like mornings when the rain stops and everything smells new again." Evan nodded, slowly wiping his hands. "Yeah. Like fixing something that shouldn't run but does anyway." We stood there a minute, both quiet. The air was heavy but kind. "Want to start her up again?" he asked finally. "Why not?" I said, sliding into the driver's seat for the first time in months. The vinyl creaked under my weight, familiar and forgiving. My hand hesitated over the key. I could feel Mary beside me, that soft hum she used to make when I'd drive, her hand resting on my arm. I turned the key. The engine caught instantly this time, strong and steady. The sound filled me up. Not loud, but full, like it belonged here. Evan laughed, clapping his hands once. "There she is," he shouted over the rumble. I nodded, grinning despite the sting behind my eyes. "Guess she's finally ready to go somewhere." Evan leaned against the hood, watching me. "You ever take long drives?" "Used to," I said. Mary and I would just head out without a map. End up in some diner, 2 towns over. Share a slice of pie. Drive home before midnight. "That sounds perfect," he said softly. "Yeah," I said, voice low. It was. We let the truck idle for a while, the rhythm of it syncing with the wind chime on the porch. Then Evan said, almost shy, "Maybe we could take her around the block sometime. You know, test the brakes." I smiled at him. "That's so?" He nodded. "It'd be good for her." I looked out at the road, wet but clearing, the sun poking through the trees like it was daring me. "Yeah," I said finally. "Maybe it's time for both of us to move again." The radio in the kitchen kicked on by itself, just static, and then a soft guitar note, that same old song about coming home. I didn't turn it off. Evan smiled. "Guess that's our cue." "Guess it is," I said, easing my hand over the wheel. The truck purred, ready. The boy grinned, ready. And for the first time in a long while, so was I. We took her slow that first drive. The road out front still glistened from the morning rain, and the tires hissed soft against the wet asphalt. Evan rode shotgun window, cracked elbow out, like he'd been doing it all his life. She sounds smooth, he said, listening close to the hum. Yeah, I replied, easing her into second gear. Almost like she remembers. We passed the old grocery store that had been boarded up for years, the faded open sign still swinging on one hinge. Everything looked the same, but older, like the whole town was holding its breath, waiting for something to change. Evan glanced out the window. My mom says this town used to be busy. She remembers lights in those windows. She's right, I said. Used to be 2 gas stations, a diner and a barber who sang hymns while he worked. Folks didn't rush much back then. Maybe that's why things lasted. He nodded eyes, thoughtful. You think it'll come back? Maybe, I said. Maybe it's not supposed to. Some things, they just teach us how to miss right. He looked at me like he was storing that away for later. We stopped at the corner near the church white steeple, peeling paint still proud. The bell tower was quiet now. Mary used to sing in that choir every Sunday, voice bright enough to make a grown man stop and listen. Evan caught me staring. You used to go there. Every week, I said softly. Stopped when she did. He didn't press. He just let the silence fill up the cab, respectful as ever. When we rolled past the park, I slowed. The swing set squeaked in the wind, empty. I remembered Danny at 7, pushing off with muddy shoes, yelling for me to watch him fly. I remembered pretending not to look so he'd try harder. Funny how fathers think that's love sometimes. Pretending not to care, so the kid will stand on his own. You ever miss someone you didn't say goodbye to, Evan? Asked quietly. All the time, I said. Some folks leave, but the echoes stay. He nodded, staring at the empty swings. My dad left before I knew what to say to him. Guess I still don't. Maybe you don't have to yet, I said. Sometimes just remembering them right is a start. He gave me a small, grateful smile, and I swear it aged him 10 years in that moment. We turned down Maple Lane, and the rain began again, light, gentle. Drops tapped the windshield, leaving trails like old tears, finding new paths. You mind if I tell you something? Evan said after a while. Go ahead. My mom's been working 2 jobs since Dad left. Says she's fine, but she's tired all the time. I try to help out, mow lawns, fix bikes, but sometimes I feel like I'm just stuck in between being a kid and being the man of the house. I nodded, feeling the weight in his words. That's a heavy road, son. But you're walking it better than most grown men I know. He looked at me, a flicker of pride breaking through the tired. Thanks. Means a lot. The truck rolled to a stop at a red light that hadn't worked in years. We both laughed at the same moment. The absurdity of stopping for something that didn't matter anymore. You can go, Evan said, chuckling. No one's watching. Oh, someone's always watching, I said with a grin. Especially when you start believing again. He raised an eyebrow. Believing in what? In second chances, I said, easing my foot on the gas. We turned back toward home, rain drumming steady on the roof. Evan leaned back, eyes closed, smiling like the sound alone was enough. For the first time since Mary's funeral, the road didn't feel empty. It felt alive, like it had been waiting for us both to return. We pulled back into the driveway just as the clouds began to break apart. The truck settled into a low idle, steady as a heartbeat. Evan leaned back in the seat, breathing deep like he'd just finished a long run. She drives perfect, he said, tapping the dashboard. Didn't even sputter. I smiled. Guess she likes you. He laughed. Nah, she likes you. I just helped her remember. That line hit harder than it should have. For a second, I couldn't answer. I just looked at him. This kid who'd wandered into my quiet life with a wrench and a kind heart, and somehow managed to loosen something rusted tight inside me. I shut the engine off and the silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was gentle, like a breath held between friends. Evan stepped out and stretched. "You should take her out on the highway sometime," he said. "Let her see the world again." "Maybe," I said, resting my hand on the steering wheel. "Highways are long. They got time to forgive you." He gave me that look again, thoughtful, older than his years. "Maybe that's what you need. Maybe that's what we both need," I said quietly. He smiled like he understood. Then he reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out something small, a folded piece of paper, oil-stained at the edges. "My dad left this behind when he went," he said, holding it out to me. "A list of the tools he taught me with. I keep it in my toolbox, but I think you should have it." I blinked, caught off guard. "You sure about that?" He nodded. "You'll take care of it better than me. Besides, you taught me more this week than he did in years." That stuck in my chest like a nail. I took the paper, carefully smoothing it open. The handwriting was rough, penciled in block letters, socket set, 3/8, ratchet. "Patience." I chuckled softly. "Patience, huh?" Evan grinned. "Yeah," he said. "That was the hardest tool to keep." I looked up at the boy, saw a mix of pride and ache there. The kind that only comes from missing someone who's still alive. "You've got his hands," I said. "But you've got your own heart. Don't lose that." He swallowed, trying to play it cool. "Thanks, Mr. Walker." The wind carried a faint smell of rain and gasoline. Somewhere a dog barked, and the radio inside my kitchen hummed back to life, just static and faint piano. Evan squinted toward the sound. "That thing ever play a real song?" I smiled. "Only when it wants to." He chuckled, then reached out his hand. "Guess I should get home before Mom starts thinking I joined a biker gang." I shook his hand, firm but gentle. "Tell her thanks for raising a good one." He laughed. "I'll tell her you said so." As he started walking away, I called after him. "Hey, Evan." He turned. "Thanks for fixing her," I said, nodding toward the truck. He shrugged, smiling. "Didn't just fix the truck, Mr. Walker." Then he waved, climbed on his bike, and pedaled off down the street tires, whispering through the puddles, sunlight glinting off the wet pavement behind him. I stood there long after he disappeared, the paper still in my hand. The word patience stared back at me, faint but steady. Inside the house, the radio finally caught a signal. A woman's voice sang slow and low, the same song Mary used to hum on our drives. I felt my throat close, but I didn't turn it off. I just stood in the doorway listening. Rainwater dripped from the truck's fender, one drop at a time. A rhythm like a ticking clock, like forgiveness, learning how to fall again. And somewhere deep down, I realized maybe the boy had fixed more than one kind of engine today. That night, the house felt different. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It had a pulse. The smell of rain still clung to the air, and the radio kept playing that same old tune like it refused to let me drift off. I sat by the window with a mug of lukewarm coffee, watching the reflection of the streetlights on the wet road. The truck sat in the driveway, proud again, a faint shimmer of moonlight across the hood. Mary would have liked that, seeing her old Chevy awake and breathing. I could almost hear her voice teasing me. "Told you she just needed a little love, Bob." I smiled to no one. "Yeah, Honorable. Guess you were right." The phone on the counter caught my eye. I hadn't picked it up in weeks, except to check the time. But that boy, the way he talked about his dad, the way he tried to fix what was left, it had stirred something I'd buried. I found myself dialing a number I hadn't in years. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. Danny's voice came through, deeper now, but still with that spark I remembered. "Hey, it's Danny. Leave it short. I'll call back if it matters." I froze. My hand trembled a little. The beep sounded. Hey son, I started, voice low. It's your old man. I, uh, I was just checking in. Nothing urgent. The truck's running again. Remember the old Chevy? Yeah. Thought you'd get a kick out of that. Anyway, hope you're doing all right. I hesitated, words catching like gravel in the throat. Guess I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you wherever you are. You probably don't need to hear that from me, but I needed to say it. Silence. Then I hung up. For a long minute, I just stared at the phone, waiting for it to do something it couldn't answer back. Outside, a single headlight flickered in the distance. Evan's bike light. He'd forgotten his wrench by the garage, the one with the red handle. I stepped out to return it, before the rain came again. The air was cool and still. Crickets had returned after the storm, chirping in uneven rhythm. I bent to pick up the wrench, then noticed something tucked under it. A folded piece of paper, with my name written in pencil. Mr. Walker, it said. Thanks for letting me help. Mom said she hasn't seen me this happy in a long time. I think fixing your truck fixed something in me too. See you tomorrow after school. Evan. I stood there, the porch light buzzing above the rain, threatening again. I hadn't realized how much I'd needed words, like that, simple, honest, undeserved. The radio inside crackled again, catching another old song. This one slower, softer. The singer's voice worn, but warm. I left the door open so the sound could drift into the night. The truck gleamed faintly under the porch, light rain specks glinting like tiny stars. I ran my hand along her fender, feeling the cool metal. You did good today, girl, I whispered. Real good. The ticking of my watch matched the patter of rain starting again. Steady, patient, forgiving. When I went back inside, I left the porch light on, not out of habit, but hope. Maybe the boy would come by early. Maybe my son would call back. Maybe the road still had miles left for me. For the first time in a long while, I didn't dread tomorrow. I was waiting for it. The next morning came wrapped in fog, that kind of soft white that turns the world quiet before it wakes. The truck looked half vanished in it, like she was dreaming too. I poured my coffee slow, listening to the faint hum of the radio still playing low in the kitchen. I'd left it on all night without meaning to. The static had a rhythm to it, almost comforting, like distant rain on a barn roof. A knock came at the door, gentle, 2 taps this time. I didn't even have to look. Come in, Evan, I called. He stepped in, dripping from the mist backpack, slung low. Morning, Mr. Walker. Didn't wake you, did I? Not at all. You're early. He grinned. Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about the drive yesterday. I nodded, sliding him a mug. Coffee. He hesitated, then took it. Guess Mom won't find out if you don't tell her. Scout's honor, I said. He sat down, warming his hands around the cup. There was a quiet to him today, not shy, just thoughtful. You ever feel like something's about to change, he said. But you don't know if it's good or bad yet. I leaned back in my chair. All the time. He looked up. How do you know which it is? You don't, I said. You just keep showing up till you find out. He thought about that, then nodded slowly. Guess that's fair. The fog outside was lifting, revealing the wet world in silver and blue. My old truck caught a bit of light chrome gleaming through the mist like a beacon. Mr. Walker, Evan said. After a while, you ever wish you could start over? Like fix everything you said wrong? Every day, I said quietly. He studied his hands. My dad called last night. First time in 2 years. I stopped mid-sip. Yeah, said he might come by next week. He sounded nervous. I didn't know what to say. I set my cup down gently. Sometimes he is enough for a start. He nodded, eyes distant. Guess I'm scared he won't stay this time. Then you make sure he knows you're worth staying for, I said. Evan looked up, something flickering in his gaze. Hope, maybe. Or fear pretending to be hope. You think people can really change, Mr. Walker? I let out a breath. If they couldn't, I'd still be a man who never started his truck again. That made him smile. Guess that's true. We sat quiet again, the kind of silence that doesn't need fixing. The radio drifted into another old song, soft piano. A man's voice singing about roads that lead you home. Evan tilted his head. She's playing a real song today. Yeah, I said. Maybe she knows something we don't. He laughed. Then reached into his backpack. I brought you something. He pulled out a small photo, edges worn. It was him and his mom standing beside a red pickup. Both smiling, wide eyes, bright in the summer Sunday. She says this was the day before he left, Evan said quietly. Said I should keep it to remember the good days. But I think you should have it. I frowned. Why me? Because you remind me of him, he said. But also because you're not him. That hit like a wrench to the chest. I swallowed. I'll keep it safe. He nodded, satisfied. The fog outside lifted, fully, sunlight spilling across the porch. Evan stood, pulling his hoodie tighter. Guess I should head to school. Mom'll tan my hide if I'm late. Tell her it was my fault, I said. He smiled. She'll believe that. When he stepped out, the bell from the old church rang in the distance, the first time I'd heard it in months. The sound rolled through the air, clean and clear. I looked at the photo again, at that red truck behind them, at the same hopeful grin he carried even now. And I thought maybe some engines don't just run on fuel. Maybe they run on faith. Even the rusted ones. That afternoon, the sky was clear for the first time in a week. The kind of crisp, endless blue that made everything look new. I spent most of it in the garage, sorting through old boxes I hadn't touched since Mary passed. Each box told a story, receipts from my shop, days old, spark plugs, half-empty cans of paint, and tucked between them a photo I'd forgotten about. Danny, maybe 17, leaning against the same Chevy, now sitting in the driveway. His grin was big, cocky, alive. My arm was around him, grease on both our sleeves. I ran my thumb across the image, remembering that day. We'd rebuilt the carburetor together. Argued half the time, laughed the other half. That night, we took the truck out and got ice cream like a couple of kids. Then life happened, and pride got in the way. The sound of a bike chain pulled me out of the memory. Evan rolled up the drive, backpack bouncing. He stopped short when he saw me holding the photo. That your son? He asked. Yeah, I said quietly. That's Danny. He looks a lot like you. Poor kid, I said with a small grin. Evan smiled back, but there was a softness in his eyes. You ever think about reaching out again? I did, I said. Left him a voicemail last night. He froze. No way. You serious? Yeah, I said. Didn't say much. Just enough, I hope. Think he'll call back. I looked down at the picture again. That's up to him. But I think the road's open now. Evan nodded slowly, like he understood. Then his gaze drifted to the shelves around us. Man, you kept everything in here. Yeah, I said. Didn't realize how much of my life was hiding under this dust. He walked over to the workbench where Mary's label still hung from that drawer. He ran his finger over the handwriting. She wrote that. Yeah, I said softly. She had this habit of labeling things I'd never lose anyway. Guess she knew someday you might need reminding. His words hung there a while. Then he said, You ever think, maybe she sent me here? I looked at him, at the calm in his face, the sincerity behind it. You believe in things like that? He shrugged. Maybe not before this week. I chuckled quietly. You sound like her. He grinned. Then she must have been right a lot. I laughed, the sound surprising me. It felt good, like the rust shaking loose from an old bolt. He pulled out his phone to check the time. "Hey, my dad texted this morning. Said he's still coming next week. Asked if we could grab lunch." I said yes. "That's good," I said. "You nervous?" He nodded. "Yeah. But I keep thinking about what you said about patience. That word's getting some mileage around here," I said. He smiled. "Guess it's catching on." We spent the next hour organizing tools, wiping down the workbench. At one point, he found Mary's old coffee tin and used it to store loose bolts. "She'd like that," I told him. When the sun started dropping, the truck's paint caught the light, that deep golden hue that only comes right before evening. Evan leaned against the fender, arms crossed. "She looks alive now," he said. "She is," I said. "So am I." The church bell rang again in the distance. I looked out through the open garage door, saw kids playing in the street, a couple walking their dog, a man watering his lawn. Life moving again. Evan turned toward me. "You think people find each other for a reason?" "Maybe not a reason," I said. "But a purpose." "Yeah. Even if it's just to remind someone that broken things can run again." He smiled, quiet but proud. "Guess that makes me the neighborhood mechanic of hearts." I laughed, shaking my head. "Careful, that's a dangerous job." "Yeah," he said, grinning. "But it pays in stories." I looked at the photo in my hand one last time, then set it gently on the workbench beside the label with Mary's name. For the first time in years, the past didn't feel heavy. It just felt finished. That night the air turned cooler, that hint of November sneaking in around the edges. I left the garage door open, light spilling onto the driveway. The truck sat there, polished, now her reflection shimmering faintly in the dark puddles left from yesterday's rain. Evan had gone home hours ago, but his laughter still echoed in the walls. It was strange how fast the house had learned his sound, how it didn't seem so empty anymore. I sat on the porch with a blanket draped across my knees, coffee steaming in my hands. The radio hummed low behind me, the same static-filled station now playing a slow fiddle tune, the kind Mary used to dance to in the kitchen when she thought I wasn't watching. I closed my eyes for a bit, listened to the wind slide through the trees. Somewhere, a train whistle carried across the fields, that lonely kind of sound that always made me feel both homesick and safe at once. Then, through the quiet, the phone inside started ringing. It took me a second to move. My hands didn't want to let go of the mug. When I did answer, my voice came out rough. "Hello." There was a pause, then a voice older, but familiar. "Hey, Dad." My breath caught. "Danny." "Yeah," he said, half laughing, half nervous. "Got your message. Been meaning to call for a while now." I swallowed, heart thudding hard. "I wasn't sure you'd pick up." "Yeah, well, neither was I." Silence. The kind that used to mean anger. But now, it just meant fear. "How you been?" I asked. "I'm okay. Work's good. Got a place near Sacramento. Been thinking about coming back for a visit." I tried to speak, but the words caught. "You should. The house is still standing. So's your old man." He chuckled softly. "Still got the truck." "She's running again," I said. "A neighbor's boy helped me fix her." "Yeah," Danny said. "That the one Mom always called the stubborn mule." "That's the one," I said, smiling. He was quiet a long while, then said, "I heard the church bells earlier. Guess they still ring, huh?" "Yeah," I said. "Not as often. But they're finding their rhythm again." He laughed, not the sharp kind from when he was a kid, but older, heavier, like he'd earned it. "Guess we're both trying to do that." "Guess we are." We talked for maybe 10 minutes. Small things. Soft things. He asked about the town, I asked about his work. Nothing deep, but enough. Enough to know the line wasn't broken anymore. Before we hung up, he said quietly, "I'll be home next week. I want to see the truck. And you." I didn't trust my voice, so I just said, "I'll keep her warm for you." When the line went dead, I stood there for a long time. The radio hummed, the night wind brushed against the screen door, and everything in the house felt like it had exhaled. I stepped outside. The moon was high, casting pale light across the yard. The truck gleamed under it. Strong, patient, waiting. I touched the hood lightly, my hand trembling. "You hear that, girl?" I whispered. "He's coming home." The ticking of my watch was steady now, sure. No skips, no hesitations. Just time doing what it's supposed to, moving forward. The rain started again, soft and warm. I didn't go inside. I just stood there, letting it fall. And somewhere between the sound of the rain, the faint radio static, and the echo of my son's voice, I realized forgiveness doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in, drop by drop, until you can finally breathe again. The next morning felt lighter, like the air itself had decided to forgive. The storm had washed everything clean, and the sky was a quiet kind of blue that looked almost new. Evan showed up right after sunrise, same hoodie, same hopeful grin. "Heard an engine running last night," he said. "That you?" "Guilty," I said. She started smoother than ever. He leaned against the porch rail, hands stuffed in his pockets. "Must have been the rain," he said. "Or maybe she just needed to feel wanted again." "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Maybe we both did." He looked at me, curious. "You sound different today." I nodded slowly. "Talked to my son last night." Evan's eyes widened. "For real? That's awesome." "Yeah," I said. Didn't say much, but we didn't have to. "He's coming home next week." The boy's face lit up. "See? Told you things change when you fix stuff." I laughed, shaking my head. "Guess you did. You're gonna start charging for wisdom soon." "Only in cheeseburgers," he said, grinning. We both laughed, and for a second it felt like the world had clicked back into place. Not perfectly, but close enough. The radio in the kitchen played faintly again, that same tune that seemed to follow us. Evan listened for a moment, then said, "She's been playing that song a lot lately." "Yeah," I said, "I think she's trying to tell me something." He grinned. "Like what?" "Maybe that it's time to drive." We spent the morning checking tire pressure, oil, a few little things. Evan moved through the steps like he'd been born to do it. He hummed the radio melody under his breath, and the sound of it filled the space where silence used to live. When we were done, he wiped his hands and leaned against the fender. "So what now?" I looked out toward the road, sun warming the pavement. "Now, we wait. My son's gonna need a ride from the station next Friday." Evan's grin spread wide. "That's one hell of a first drive." "Yeah," I said softly. "It is." He nodded, then looked down. My dad texted again. "Says he's still coming too." "That's good news," I said. "Yeah. I don't know what I'll say when I see him, but I figure maybe I don't have to say much. Maybe just showing up's enough." "It usually is," I said. The wind picked up, rustling through the trees. Somewhere in that sound I could almost hear Mary laughing, that low, familiar hum that used to fill the house. Evan noticed my expression and asked quietly, "You miss her every day, don't you?" "Every minute," I said. "But missing her doesn't hurt the same anymore. It feels like gratitude. Now." He nodded, understanding in his eyes, far older than 16. "My mom says that's what love turns into when it doesn't have anywhere else to go." I smiled. "Your mom's got a way with words." "She does," he said. "I think she'd like you." "I'd like her too," I said. "Tell her I said thanks for lending me her best mechanic." He blushed, trying to hide a grin. She'd probably make me mow your lawn next. Tell her she's hired, I said. We shared a laugh. But beneath it, something deeper pulsed. Quiet joy. The kind that comes after a long silence. The radio crackled once more static, then a woman's voice. For anyone waiting for someone to come home, this one's for you. Evan looked at me. That's gotta be a sign. Yeah, I said, eyes on the horizon. And I'm listening. He smiled, kicked the toe of his boot against the gravel and said, You know, Mr. Walker, I think your truck's got more stories left in her. Maybe so, I said, patting the hood. And so do we. The afternoon sun climbed higher, and for the first time in years the sound of laughter and an engine shared the same space again. Friday came fast. Funny how time moves once you stop fighting it. The morning light spilled through the window in thin gold lines, and for the first time in years, I didn't wake to silence. I woke to purpose. Evan was already out front when I stepped outside, backpack slung, hair damp from the dew. You ready? He asked. Ready as I'll ever be. He grinned. Let's bring him home. The air was crisp, the kind that bites just enough to remind you, you're alive. I turned the key, and the old Chevy rumbled awake without hesitation. That sound still felt like grace. As we pulled out of the driveway, the neighborhood seemed to glow morning sun on wet roofs, a curtain fluttering from an upstairs window, the smell of coffee drifting from a porch 2 houses down. Ordinary beauty, the kind I'd stopped noticing until lately. Evan watched the trees streak by sunlight flickering between the branches. You nervous? He asked. Like a man walking into church for the first time in years, I said. He smiled softly. Then you're doing it right. The radio played faintly, the same station, the same fragile signal. Static faded into a guitar riff, then a man's voice. Home ain't where you've been. It's where they're waiting for you. We both listened quiet. The road stretched ahead wide and forgiving. The town blurred past the diner, the old feed store, the church steeple gleaming white in the distance. Every landmark felt like a hand on my shoulder, saying, You made it back. About halfway to the station, Evan said, You ever think maybe the hard stuff happens so we can meet the right people to help us through it? More and more lately, I said. And I'm starting to think that's not an accident. He nodded, smiling faintly. Mom says God doesn't always send angels. Sometimes he just sends mechanics. That made me laugh, a full, deep laugh that felt like it came from someplace new. Well, tell your mom she sent me one hell of a good one. The tracks came into view. The faded sign for the depot. The same wooden bench where Mary and I once waited for the train that took Danny to college. I remembered hugging him that morning, telling him to make something of himself. I also remembered the way I didn't say I love you before he boarded. Pride's a thief that steals what you can't buy back. Evan noticed the change in my face. You okay? Yeah, I said softly. Just thinking about how easy it is to say the wrong thing and how hard it is to say the right one. He nodded. You'll get it right this time. We parked near the edge of the platform. The whistle sounded in the distance, faint at first, then growing until the rails hummed beneath our feet. Evan stepped out, hands stuffed in his pockets. You want me to wait here? Yeah, I said, but don't disappear. I might need a mechanic for this heart of mine. He grinned. I'll keep the engine warm. The train eased into the station brakes, hissing steel, sighing. I saw faces in the windows, strangers first, then one I knew instantly. Older, sure. A beard now. But the eyes were Danny's. He stepped off slow, like the ground itself might give way. We just stared for a second, the years between us shrinking and stretching all at once. Then he smiled, small, uncertain, but real. Hey, Dad. My voice broke when I said it. Hey, son. He dropped his bag and pulled me in, and I felt the weight I'd carried for decades finally let go. The smell of rain, the sound of trains, The hum of my own heartbeat, all of it wrapped up in that moment. When we pulled apart, he looked past me and smiled. "That the old Chevy? Running better than ever," I said. "Want to drive her home?" He laughed. "You serious?" I tossed him the keys. "Yeah. She's been waiting for you." He caught them, eyes bright. "Guess it's about time I earned her back." The sun broke through the clouds, just then lighting the truck like it had been waiting for this too. Danny slid behind the wheel like he'd never left. He ran his hand across the steering wheel. That same grin stretching wide, the one that always got him out of trouble as a kid. "She feels smaller," he said, starting the engine. "You just got bigger," I said, settling into the passenger seat. The truck rumbled to life, steady and sure. Evan leaned on the fence nearby, hands tucked in his hoodie, smiling like he'd been waiting for this ending all along. Danny nodded toward him. "That your new partner?" "Something like that," I said. "Kid's got more heart than horsepower." Evan chuckled. "Hey, I just fix what's broke." Danny grinned. "Guess you've been busy then." We all laughed, the kind of laugh that comes easy when something old finally heals. Then Danny eased the truck onto the road. The tires rolled over the wet gravel, the sound mixing with the wind, the hum of life returning. The radio crackled to life again, right on cue, no static this time, just that same soft tune that had followed us all week. Mary's favorite. The one about coming home. Danny turned it up, glanced over at me. "You kept her station." "Didn't have the heart to change it," I said. He nodded, eyes on the road. "She'd like that." We rode in silence a while, the kind that doesn't press for words. The world outside rolled by, slow and beautiful. Bare trees, glinting puddles, the church steeple in the distance. For once, the road didn't feel empty. It felt full. Evan followed on his bike behind us, coasting easy, one hand on the handlebar's head, tilted back into the wind. It was like watching two pieces of my life moving side by side. One coming home, the other learning how to begin. "Dad," Danny said quietly, "I'm sorry." I looked at him. His eyes were wet, but steady. "For what?" "For leaving angry. For staying gone." I swallowed hard. "I gave you reasons." He shook his head. "You gave me roots. I just didn't know how to use them." The weight between us broke like thin ice. I reached over, rested my hand on his shoulder. "We're here now. That's enough." He nodded, blinking fast, smiling small. "Yeah, it is." We pulled into the driveway. The house stood just like always. Porch light still glowing, garage door half open, rainwater glimmering on the concrete. Evan rolled up beside us, breathless and grinning. "She runs smooth, huh?" he said. Danny stepped out, stretching his arms. "Kid, she runs better than new." Evan beamed. "Told you she just needed a little patience." I smiled at that word again. Patience. The one that had followed us like a prayer. Danny looked between us. "You two make a good team." Evan shrugged. "Guess we both like saving old things." The three of us stood there in the fading light. A boy, a son, and an old man. And for the first time in years, it felt like the world had lined up the way it was meant to. The wind carried the smell of rain again, faint and sweet. The porch bulb flickered once, like Mary winking from wherever she was. The radio in the kitchen hummed on by itself, that same song, replaying one last time. Danny smiled softly. "You ever think she's still here watching?" I nodded, eyes misting. "I don't think she ever left." He looked at the truck, then at me. "Then maybe we should take her for one more drive." Evan grinned. "I'll race you home." Danny laughed. "You're on." He climbed back in, I beside him, Evan pedaling fast behind us. The sky broke open with a band of orange light stretching across the clouds. As we turned down Cedar Street, the watch on my wrist ticked steady, one beat at a time, and the road ahead looked wide and forgiving. Mary's song swelled on the radio, and I found myself whispering under my breath, "Yeah, sweetheart. We're all home now. The truck rolled on, carrying 3 hearts and one old melody into the golden light.